Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. As the lights of the city flickered outside the window, Peter Bennett stood tall in his penthouse, staring out over the New York skyline. At 35, he was a successful tech CEO, living in luxury, surrounded by wealth and power. But as the city buzzed with life below, Peter felt an emptiness inside, a longing he couldn't quite name. His life was a series of high-stakes meetings, business deals, and charity galas, but none of it filled the void in his heart. What he didn't know was that a single mistake, a simple invitation sent to the wrong address, was about to change everything. Peter had been invited to an exclusive charity event, a high-profile gala that promised an evening of influential guests and potential business deals. But when his assistant sent the invite, she mistakenly addressed it to someone else. That's how Emily Parker, a waitress struggling to pay rent and keep her dreams alive, found herself holding the invitation meant for Peter Bennett. She had never heard of him, but the invite, stamped with the seal of a prestigious organization, looked like her chance to finally escape her daily grind. With nothing to lose, Emily decided to attend. She wasn't someone who typically rubbed elbows with the wealthy, but tonight, she was stepping into their world. As she walked into the venue, the grand chandeliers overhead, the soft hum of the crowd, and the glittering conversation around her made her feel out of place. She tugged at her old dress, wishing it wasn't so worn at the seams. But she was determined. This could be the break she needed. Meanwhile, Peter, unaware of the mix-up, was already at the event, holding court with other influential guests. His face was stoic, his mind sharp, but his heart, as always, was distant. He glanced around the room, looking for someone to connect with, but the usual crowd of business tycoons and socialites only made him feel more isolated. He was tired of the polished conversations and empty pleasantries. He longed for something real, something that made him feel alive. It was then that Emily, unknowingly carrying Peter's invitation, walked into the room. Her nervous smile caught his attention. She looked out of place, but there was something genuine about her, something he hadn't seen in anyone at these events in a long time. Without thinking, Peter stood up and approached her, offering a friendly smile. "Hi, are you here for the charity event?" Peter asked, his voice warm but curious. Emily looked up, startled by the attention. She hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Yes, I think I am." "I'm Emily," she said softly, her voice unsure. Peter gave her an amused look. "You don't look like you belong here," he said with a half-smile, noticing the old dress she was wearing. Emily laughed nervously. "I don't. But I guess tonight's a one-off," she replied, tugging at the hem of her dress. Peter's smile widened, and for the first time in a long while, he felt something stir inside him. It wasn't the usual fake smile he had to put on for business, but a genuine reaction to someone who wasn't trying to impress him or gain something from their encounter. As the conversation continued, Emily realized something was off. She had no idea who Peter was, but he seemed different from the usual crowd. She told him she worked as a waitress, struggling to make ends meet, and shared her dream of one day opening her own art studio. Peter listened intently, not interrupting, something he rarely did in conversations. He found himself drawn to her honesty and openness. It wasn't until the evening continued, and Peter overheard someone mention Peter Bennett, that Emily realized her mistake. She had been talking to the man she had mistakenly thought was just another guest. The CEO. The millionaire. She was mortified. She quickly excused herself, wanting to run away from the embarrassing situation. But Peter, not wanting to let her go, followed her. He had no idea why, but he felt an unexpected connection to this woman who had no agenda, no plans to use him for anything. As they stood outside, away from the crowd, Peter spoke softly, his voice more serious than before. "I wasn't going to correct you earlier, Peter. Admit it. I liked talking to you. You're real." Emily blinked, still processing everything. "I'm sorry," she stammered, her face turning bright red. "I didn't know. I didn't mean to," Peter cut her off with a gentle smile. "It's okay. I don't mind. I'm glad you came." And for the first time in years, Peter felt a spark of hope. Maybe it wasn't about the money or the power. Maybe it was about something real, something worth holding on to. But Emily, still unsure of what to make of everything, took a deep breath. "I have to go," she said, her voice steadying. "I'm not supposed to be here." Peter reached out, placing a hand on her arm. "Wait," he said. "I know this sounds crazy, but would you like to have dinner with me?" Emily looked up, stunned. "Dinner?" Peter nodded, his eyes sincere. "Yes. I'd like to get to know you better, without all the pretenses. I'll make sure you're not out of place." For the first time in a long time, Emily felt like she belonged somewhere. She hesitated for a moment, but the warmth in his eyes made her heart race. "Okay," she said finally. "But just dinner." And so, a mistake, the wrong invitation, the wrong seat at the wrong table, had started something neither of them could have expected. The next evening, Emily couldn't stop thinking about Peter. She had expected the night to be awkward, but somehow, it had turned out to be the most genuine conversation she'd had in ages. She tried to shake the thoughts from her head as she sat in her small apartment, sorting through bills and trying to figure out how she was going to make ends meet this month. But no matter how hard she tried, Peter's invitation lingered in her mind, like a dream she hadn't quite woken up from. She had never been one to rub elbows with the wealthy. Growing up, it was always about getting by, taking what life handed her, and doing the best she could with it. But that night, when Peter had invited her to dinner, something shifted in her. He hadn't treated her like a charity case. He had listened to her. Really listened. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen. Emily glanced down at the clock. It was nearly time. She smoothed down her dress, adjusting the sleeves. Nervously. It wasn't new, she'd bought it secondhand, but she'd spent extra time ironing it, trying to make it look presentable. It wasn't much, but it was all she had. She didn't want to seem out of place. When she arrived at the restaurant, she felt the familiar rush of nerves. The restaurant was fancy, one of those places where the chandeliers sparkled like diamonds and every table seemed occupied by people who belonged there. But then she remembered Peter's words from the night before, his smile when he invited her to dinner, and it gave her the confidence to push past the uncomfortable feeling in her chest. Peter was already seated at a corner table, looking calm and composed. His presence was unmistakable, tall, with a sharp suit and perfectly styled hair. But there was something about him that didn't scream CEO. Maybe it was the way he looked at her when she arrived, like he was actually happy to see her, or the fact that he didn't seem to care about the status of the people around him. It was a little unsettling, but in the best way possible. "You made it," Peter said, standing up to greet her. "I'm glad you came." Emily smiled, a little unsure of herself, but grateful for his warmth. "Thank you for inviting me." I hope I'm not underdressed," she said, glancing down at her dress. Peter laughed softly. "You look perfect," he said. "Come on, let's sit down." As they settled into the meal, the conversation flowed easily. They talked about everything and nothing, how she had been working as a waitress for years, her hopes of one day opening an art studio, her love for painting. Peter, in turn, told her about his company, his responsibilities as a CEO, and how he'd built his empire from the ground up. But it was when he spoke about his personal life that she realized just how lonely he was. "It's funny," Peter said, pausing for a moment, his eyes reflecting a quiet sadness. "People think being successful means you have everything figured out. But sometimes, it's just the opposite. I've been surrounded by people for years, but none of them know me." "Not really." Emily studied him for a moment. "That must be hard," she said softly. Peter looked at her, his gaze steady. "It is," he admitted. "But sometimes, I think I've just gotten used to it." Emily didn't know what to say. She could feel the weight of his words, but she also understood that feeling. She had spent years feeling the same way, like she was invisible to the world around her, just another face in the crowd. But with Peter, for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel invisible. "You know," Emily said after a pause, "sometimes the people who seem the most put together are the ones who need the most help." Peter raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What do you mean?" She smiled. "Well, when you're struggling, people see it. But when you're successful, they expect you to have it all under control. They don't see the cracks beneath the surface." Peter sat back in his chair, taking in her words. For a moment, he didn't speak, just looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Emily shifted uncomfortably under his gaze, but when he spoke, his voice was softer, almost vulnerable. "You're right," Peter said quietly. "I guess that's why I don't trust anyone. They always want something from me." Emily's heart softened at his admission. "Not everyone," she said gently. "Some people just want to know the real you." Peter nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I hope you're right." For the rest of the evening, they shared stories, laughed at little jokes, and for the first time in ages, both of them felt a genuine connection. As the night wore on, Emily realized that her perception of Peter was changing. He wasn't the distant, untouchable CEO she had assumed. He was a man, just like anyone else, with his own struggles and fears. And in that moment, Emily realized that she wasn't just the waitress anymore. She was someone who mattered to him. As they finished their meal and stood up to leave, Peter looked at Emily with a serious expression. "I know this might sound strange," he said, "but I'm glad you came into my life tonight. You've given me something I didn't know I was missing." Emily met his gaze, her heart racing. "What's that?" Peter smiled softly. "A reminder that not everything in life is about business. That there's more to life than power and success." And just like that, the night ended with a new beginning, one that neither of them could have predicted. The next few days were a whirlwind for Emily. Her life had always been routine: wake up, work, eat, sleep. But after that dinner with Peter, things started to feel different. She found herself thinking about him constantly, wondering if the connection they shared was as real to him as it felt to her. But she couldn't deny the nagging voice in the back of her mind. He was a millionaire CEO. She was a waitress struggling to make ends meet. What could they possibly have in common beyond that one night? Peter, on the other hand, couldn't stop thinking about Emily either. Every time he closed his eyes, he found himself replaying their conversation over and over. There was something about her, something so genuine and raw, that made him feel more alive than he had in years. He wasn't used to being around people who didn't want something from him, and Emily was different. She wasn't trying to impress him or get something from him. She was just herself. And that was exactly what he needed. It was a Friday afternoon when Peter found himself calling Emily again. He had tried to focus on work, but it was impossible. He wanted to hear her voice again, wanted to see her again. He dialed her number, hesitated for a moment, and then hit call. "Hello?" Emily's voice came through the phone, warm and steady. "Hi, Emily. It's Peter," he said, his voice a little uncertain. "Peter." "Hey, how's it going?" she replied, her tone casual but with a hint of surprise. "I've been thinking about you," Peter said, not sure how to continue. "I know it's only been a few days, but I was wondering, would you like to meet up again? Maybe this weekend?" Emily paused. Part of her wanted to say yes right away. But another part of her still hesitated. What if this was all just a fleeting moment? What if he was just being kind out of obligation? "I don't know, Peter," she started, biting her lip. "I mean, I'd like to, but I don't want to get my hopes up. I don't know if this is a good idea." Peter's heart sank. "I understand. But I really do want to see you again, Emily. I don't want this to be just one night. Can you give me a chance to prove that I'm serious about this?" Emily was silent for a moment, considering his words. Something in his voice told her he wasn't joking. Maybe he wasn't as cold and distant as he appeared. Maybe this could be something real. "Okay," she said finally, a small smile tugging at her lips. "But I'm not going to get my hopes up, all right?" Peter chuckled, the sound light and easy. "Fair enough. But I promise you, Emily, I'm not going anywhere." And just like that, they made plans to meet up the following Saturday. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was enough. Both of them knew that the simple act of getting together again was a step towards something bigger. Saturday came quickly, and Emily found herself standing outside a small cafe, checking her phone for the time. She felt nervous, but also excited. She had no idea what to expect, but she knew one thing for sure: she wanted to see where this could go. As she looked around, she spotted Peter walking toward her. He was dressed casually, a sharp contrast to the suits he usually wore for business. His smile was warm, and for the first time, Emily saw a side of him that felt completely genuine. "Hey," Peter said, his voice full of warmth as he approached her. "You look great." Emily blushed. "Thanks. You look different," she said, her smile shy. Peter laughed softly. "I guess I'm not all business all the time, huh?" They sat down at a table outside, and the conversation flowed easily again. This time, there was no awkwardness. No tension. Just two people getting to know each other better, without pretense, without expectation. As they chatted about their lives, their dreams, and the things that made them tick, Emily began to realize something. She had been so caught up in the idea that they were from different worlds, that their connection couldn't possibly work. But now, sitting there with Peter, she realized that maybe it wasn't about the money or the background. Maybe it was about how they made each other feel. Peter looked at her, his expression more serious than it had been before. "I don't know what this is, Emily," he said softly. "But I want to find out. I've spent so much of my life building an empire, but I think I've been missing out on what really matters." Emily felt a flutter in her chest. "And what's that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Peter reached across the table, his hand resting just inches from hers. "You," he said simply. "I want to find out what's real between us." Her heart skipped a beat as she looked at him. He wasn't just saying words, she could see it in his eyes. There was sincerity there, and for the first time in a long time, Emily felt like she wasn't just someone to pity or help. She was someone worth fighting for. And in that moment, Emily realized that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a mistake. Maybe the invitation sent to the wrong address had been the start of something beautiful. As the days passed, Emily and Peter grew closer. Every moment they spent together felt like a step forward, each conversation peeling back layers of their personalities that neither had shown to anyone else. Emily had always kept her guard up, but with Peter, she felt like she could finally be herself. She no longer saw herself as just a waitress struggling to make ends meet. She felt seen, heard, and, most importantly, valued. Peter, too, found himself changing. The walls he had built around himself, walls made of wealth and status, were slowly crumbling. Emily's honesty and kindness had shown him a side of life he had long neglected. He had been so focused on his work, on the business empire he had built, that he had forgotten what it felt like to truly connect with someone. To feel real. They met nearly every weekend, their time together becoming something they both looked forward to. Emily introduced Peter to the small joys of her world, the quiet afternoons spent in art galleries, the warmth of a simple coffee shop, and the beauty in the mundane things he had never taken the time to notice. Peter, in return, took her to places she had never dreamed of, luxurious restaurants, private events, and business galas where she was introduced to a side of the world she had only heard about. One evening, after a long day spent at an art gallery, Peter and Emily sat in a small park, the city lights twinkling in the distance. Emily leaned back on the bench, her eyes fixed on the stars above. There was a calmness to the evening, a peacefulness she had never experienced before. For the first time, she didn't feel out of place, even in the midst of the wealth and opulence that surrounded Peter. "You've changed me, Emily," Peter said, his voice low and sincere. "Before I met you, I thought everything in life was about building my empire, about business deals and power. But now I realize that none of that matters if you don't have someone to share it with." Emily turned to look at him, her heart beating faster at his words. "I never thought I could be part of your world," she said softly. "I always thought people like you lived in a different reality, one where people only cared about money and status." Peter shook his head, taking her hand in his. "That's the old me," he said. "The real me, the one I've discovered because of you, cares about love, about connection. About finding something that's real." Emily's chest tightened with emotion. She had never imagined that a chance meeting, a simple mistake with an invitation, could lead to something so meaningful. She had never believed in fairy tales, never thought she would find someone who would see her for who she truly was. But here she was, sitting next to a man who not only saw her but valued her. Peter leaned closer, his voice barely a whisper. "You've changed my life, Emily. I don't want to go back to the way things were before. I want us to build something together." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes, not out of sadness, but out of sheer relief. She had spent so long feeling invisible, like she didn't matter. But with Peter, she felt like she finally did. "I want that too," Emily replied, her voice trembling. "I never thought this could happen. But now I can't imagine my life without you." Peter's eyes softened, and he took a deep breath. "Then let's not waste any more time," he said, the conviction in his voice clear. "Let's make this real." They sat there for a few more moments, their hands intertwined, the world around them fading into the background. In that moment, they both knew that they had found something rare and beautiful. Something real. As the weeks went by, Emily and Peter continued to grow closer. The connection they shared only deepened, and with every passing day, their bond became unbreakable. They learned to navigate the differences in their worlds, finding common ground in the love they had discovered for each other. It wasn't always easy, there were moments of doubt, moments where they questioned if it could really work. But they always came back to one truth: they were better together. One evening, Peter took Emily to a small, intimate dinner. As they sat at a quiet corner table, Peter reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "I don't want to waste another moment. Emily, will you marry me?" Emily's breath caught in her throat as she looked at him, her heart racing. "Yes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, I will." And with that simple answer, everything changed. The invitation that had been sent to the wrong address, the mistake that started it all, had led them to this moment. A moment of love, of commitment, of something real. It wasn't the life they had expected, but it was the life they had always needed. As Peter slipped the ring on her finger, they both knew that this was only the beginning. Their story, full of unexpected twists and turns, was just getting started. Months passed, and Emily and Peter's relationship only grew stronger. They had found their rhythm, balancing their very different worlds with love, understanding, and mutual respect. Emily had moved into Peter's penthouse, and though she was still getting used to the luxury around her, she never forgot her roots. Peter had made it clear that she wasn't just part of his life because of his wealth. She was with him because of who she was, because of the way she made him feel like he was finally living a life that mattered. One evening, as they sat on the balcony watching the sunset, Peter turned to Emily with a serious look in his eyes. "Emily," he said, his voice gentle but filled with resolve. "There's something I need to tell you." Emily looked at him, her heart skipping a beat. "What is it?" Peter hesitated for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "You know, when we first met, I was so caught up in my work, in the pressure of everything I had built. But since we've been together, I've realized that I've been living my life all wrong. I've been prioritizing everything that doesn't matter. And now I know, you are what truly matters." Emily's eyes softened, her heart swelling with love. She had known that Peter cared for her, but hearing him say it aloud made it feel even more real. "Peter, I feel the same way," she said quietly. "I never thought I would find someone who sees me for who I am, not just for where I came from or what I have." Peter smiled, his eyes filled with love. "That's exactly why I want to do something special. I want to show you that I'm committed to building a life with you, not just in business but in everything. I want to make sure we have a future that's as real as our connection." Emily's breath caught in her throat. She had a feeling where this was going, but she wanted to hear it from him. Peter reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. He opened it slowly, revealing a stunning diamond ring that sparkled in the fading light of the sunset. "Emily, will you marry me?" Peter asked, his voice filled with sincerity and love. "Will you be my partner in this life, as we build something together, something that's real and lasting?" Tears filled Emily's eyes as she looked at the ring, then at Peter. She had never expected this moment, never thought she would find someone who truly understood her, someone who loved her for exactly who she was. "Yes, Peter. Yes, I will marry you," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Peter smiled, slipping the ring onto her finger, the gesture symbolizing everything they had built together, trust, love, and a commitment to each other. He pulled her into his arms, and they shared a kiss that sealed the promise they had made to each other. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, Emily knew that they had come a long way from that night when a simple invitation had changed everything. They had both been searching for something real, something that went beyond appearances, beyond wealth and status. And now, they had found it in each other. Their journey wasn't over yet, but as they looked toward the future, they knew that together, they could face anything. Love had a way of breaking down the walls they had built around their hearts, and now, as they embraced the life they had built together, they knew they were ready for whatever came next. The mistakes, the misunderstandings, and the differences in their worlds no longer seemed important. They had found a love that was real, a love that would last. And as the sun finally set on that beautiful evening, Emily and Peter stood side by side, knowing that this was only the beginning of the rest of their lives. As weeks passed after their engagement, Emily and Peter began planning their future together. The transition from their individual lives to becoming a united couple was not without its challenges. Emily, who had always prided herself on being independent, struggled to adjust to the idea of depending on someone, even Peter. She had grown up learning that she had to work hard for everything she had, and now, the idea of being part of a world of luxury, of being supported, felt both exciting and intimidating. Peter, on the other hand, was more than eager to share everything he had with her. He had never felt more certain of anything in his life. His business empire, his wealth, none of it seemed as meaningful as the life they were about to build together. But he also recognized that the adjustment wasn't going to be easy for Emily. She had come from a different world, a world where every penny counted, and now she was being thrust into one where money was never a concern. One evening, as they sat in their living room, Emily was sorting through some old art sketches she had brought with her. Peter watched her in silence for a moment, then gently asked, "How are you feeling about all of this?" Emily looked up from her sketches, surprised by the question. "I don't know," she said honestly. "It's not that I don't want this. I do. But I feel like I'm losing a part of who I am." Peter nodded, understanding more than she knew. "You don't have to lose anything, Emily. I want you to feel like yourself, like the woman I fell in love with. You don't have to change for me. You're already perfect as you are." His words struck her deeply. Peter had always accepted her, flaws and all. But she had always been her own person, and now, as they moved forward together, she worried that she might lose the essence of who she was in the face of everything Peter represented. The following weeks were a delicate dance of compromise. Peter began to show Emily more of his world, but in a way that was mindful of her comfort level. They traveled to business meetings together, but he made sure she had time to pursue her art, to be surrounded by things that grounded her. One day, Peter surprised her with a trip to a small art retreat in the mountains. It wasn't extravagant, it was peaceful and simple, just a cabin by a lake with enough room for her to paint in peace. Emily was stunned by the gesture. It wasn't about luxury or showing off wealth. It was about understanding her passions and wanting to nurture them. As they arrived at the retreat, Emily couldn't hold back her tears. She had been so focused on their differences, on the gap between their worlds, that she hadn't realized how much Peter truly cared about her well-being. "Thank you," she whispered, looking up at him with gratitude in her eyes. Peter smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I know this is important to you. It's important to me too. I want you to feel like you're not losing yourself. That you can still have everything you dreamed of, and still have me." That night, as they sat by the fire, Emily found herself reflecting on how far they had come. When they had first met, she had never imagined she'd be sitting here with him, in the quiet of nature, with the love of her life. She had never thought she could belong in this world. But now, she knew that home wasn't about where you were or how much you had, it was about who you were with. And in that moment, she felt more at home than she ever had before. "You're right, Peter," Emily said quietly, her voice filled with certainty. "I don't have to lose anything. I just have to learn to embrace what we're building together." Peter reached out and took her hand, his grip steady and warm. "Exactly. We're in this together, Emily. And no matter what happens, I'm right here with you." With that simple assurance, Emily felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She had spent so much time worrying about fitting into Peter's world, but now she realized that it wasn't about fitting in, it was about blending their worlds together, creating something new, something better. As the days passed, Emily continued to paint, her art flourishing in ways she had never imagined. Peter remained by her side, always supporting her dreams, always encouraging her to keep growing. And in return, she helped him reconnect with the parts of himself he had long buried, his passion for life outside of business, his ability to care deeply, to love freely. Together, they had built a life that was more than just a fairy tale. It was real, it was full of challenges, but most of all, it was built on love. A love that had begun with an invitation sent to the wrong address, but that had turned out to be the best mistake either of them had ever made. As Emily and Peter's relationship continued to deepen, they started to face new challenges that neither of them had expected. One morning, as they sat down for breakfast in their cozy kitchen, Peter noticed a change in Emily's demeanor. She had been unusually quiet, lost in thought as she stirred her coffee. He could see the familiar signs of worry on her face, and he knew something was on her mind. "What's going on, Emily?" Peter asked gently, reaching across the table to take her hand. "You've been distant lately." Emily hesitated, looking down at her cup. She wasn't sure how to say what had been bothering her. She had always prided herself on being open and honest, but now, after everything they had been through, she feared that the truth might create a divide between them. "I don't know," she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. "It's just, I've been thinking a lot about the future, about us. And sometimes I feel like I'm not enough. Like I'm not on your level, you know?" Peter's expression softened, and he gently lifted her chin, guiding her eyes to meet his. "Emily, I don't ever want you to feel that way. You are more than enough. You are exactly what I need. We've built something amazing together, and that's all that matters to me." Emily looked into his eyes, but the doubt still lingered in her heart. But I'm not like you, Peter. I don't come from money. I don't come from a world where everything is easy. I've had to work for everything I have, and I'm still not sure if I belong in yours. Peter shook his head. His voice firm but kind. Emily, you belong with me because of who you are. Not because of where you come from or what you have. You make me better. You make my life real. That's all I care about. Emily let out a deep breath, still feeling the weight of her worries. I'm just scared, she admitted. I'm scared that one day you'll realize you're better off without me. That the difference between our worlds will be too much to handle. Peter smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. You don't need to be scared, Emily. I love you. And love isn't about how much money you have or the life you've lived. It's about the connection, the trust, the understanding. And I trust you. I've never trusted anyone like I trust you. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as Peter's words sank in. She had always been afraid of being judged, of not being good enough. But with Peter, she had never felt that way. He saw her for who she was, not for what she lacked. And for the first time, Emily realized that maybe, just maybe, she didn't need to carry the weight of her past anymore. I'm sorry, Emily whispered, wiping away a tear. I just needed to hear you say that. Peter squeezed her hand. There's nothing to apologize for. I love you, Emily. And no matter what happens, we will always be in this together. In that moment, something inside Emily shifted. The doubts that had plagued her for so long began to fade. She had spent so much time worrying about being good enough for Peter, but she realized that all along, he had never expected her to be perfect. He loved her as she was, and that was enough. Later that day, as they took a walk in the park, hand in hand, Emily felt lighter, freer. For the first time, she wasn't worried about fitting in or measuring up. She was simply herself, and that was exactly what Peter loved. Thank you, Peter, she said, her voice full of gratitude. Thank you for helping me see what really matters. Peter smiled, pulling her close as they strolled under the shade of the trees. I'll always help you see it, Emily. Because you're my world. And as they walked together, side by side, Emily knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. The invitation sent to the wrong address had brought them together, but their love, their commitment to each other, was what would carry them through the rest of their lives. Months went by, and Emily and Peter's love only grew stronger. They had found a rhythm in their lives, balancing their differences and their shared dreams. Emily had settled into her new life, but it wasn't without its challenges. Sometimes, the weight of the world Peter came from would still make her feel out of place. But every time she doubted herself, Peter was there to remind her that she didn't need to change to fit in his world, she was the world he wanted to build. With every passing day, Emily realized more and more that their love wasn't about the wealth, the power, or the lifestyle. It was about how they made each other feel. It was about the real connection they shared. One evening, as they sat together on the couch in their penthouse, Peter noticed a change in Emily. She was staring at the engagement ring on her finger, lost in thought. He had seen this look before. It was the same look she had when they first started dating, the look of someone grappling with the difference between the life they had and the one they dreamed of. What's on your mind, Emily? Peter asked gently, his voice laced with concern. Emily sighed, her fingers tracing the edges of the diamond. I've been thinking about the future, she said softly. I never imagined I would be living this life. I still feel like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop, like I don't deserve all of this. Peter's heart ached as he listened to her. He understood her fears, even though he couldn't fully relate to them. Emily, listen to me, he said, taking her hand in his. You've worked harder than anyone I know. You've earned everything you've achieved, and you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Emily looked at him, her eyes filled with doubt. But I come from nothing, Peter. You come from a world of power and privilege. Sometimes, I feel like I'm just pretending to fit in. Peter shook his head, his voice firm but loving. You're not pretending, Emily. You're my equal. We're equals. This life we're building together, it's not just about what we have. It's about who we are, and what we mean to each other. Emily closed her eyes, letting his words sink in. She had spent so much of her life feeling like she didn't belong, like she was always reaching for something just out of her grasp. But now, with Peter, she was starting to realize that she didn't need to reach anymore. She was already there. I love you, Peter, Emily whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. And I'm scared. I'm scared of losing myself in this life, in this world. Peter smiled softly, pulling her into his arms. You won't lose yourself, Emily. You're stronger than you know. And you've already changed me in ways I can't even explain. We're building something real here. Something that's ours, not because of anything we have, but because of who we are together. As they sat there, wrapped in each other's arms, Emily realized something. She had spent so much time thinking that the life she had with Peter was too good to be true, that she didn't belong in this world. But now, she understood that she wasn't just part of Peter's world. They were part of each other's world. And that was all that mattered. The following weeks were full of excitement as they prepared for their wedding. It wasn't a grand, lavish affair, but a small, intimate ceremony with only their closest friends and family. Emily wanted it to be simple and real, just like their love. As the wedding day approached, she couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come, from a chance encounter, to a friendship, and now to this moment of commitment. On the day of the wedding, Emily stood in front of the mirror, her heart racing. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she felt a calmness inside her. She had spent so many years feeling lost, unsure of who she was and where she belonged. But now, as she looked at herself in the mirror, she realized that she had found her place. Her place was with Peter. As she walked down the aisle, Peter's eyes met hers, and in that moment, everything else faded away. All that mattered was the love they had built together. The life they had created, one that was real, one that was theirs. When they exchanged vows, Emily could see the sincerity in Peter's eyes. And when he kissed her, it wasn't just a kiss, it was a promise. A promise that no matter what, they would always find their way back to each other. As they stood there, hand in hand, Peter whispered in her ear, "We did it, Emily. We built something real." And in that moment, Emily knew that no matter where life took them, they would always have each other. The mistakes, the misunderstandings, the doubts, they were all part of their story. And now, their story was just beginning. Years passed, and Emily and Peter's life together continued to unfold in ways neither of them had expected. Their love, tested by time, grew even deeper. They built their empire, but more importantly, they built a home. It wasn't a house made of luxury or status, it was a home built on love, trust, and understanding. They learned that true happiness wasn't about the things they owned, but about the people they had in their lives and the connections they shared. Emily had started her own art gallery, something she had dreamed of for years. Peter supported her every step of the way, never once doubting her abilities. He attended her exhibitions, proud of everything she had accomplished. And she, in turn, continued to inspire him with her creativity, reminding him every day that there was more to life than business. Together, they complemented each other in ways neither of them had imagined. One evening, as they sat in their cozy living room, a place they had made their own, Peter turned to Emily with a smile. "I still can't believe how far we've come," he said, his voice filled with wonder. Emily smiled back, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I know. Sometimes I still feel like I'm dreaming." Peter reached over, taking her hand in his. "It's all real, Emily. Every moment of it. And I'm so glad it's with you." The years had not been without their challenges. There were times when work got overwhelming, and other times when they had to navigate through difficult personal decisions. But through it all, they never wavered in their commitment to each other. They had built a life based on mutual respect, a life where both of them felt like they mattered. One day, as they sat together in the park, watching their children play, Emily looked at Peter with a deep sense of peace. They had 2 children now, both of whom had inherited their mother's creativity and their father's determination. They were the perfect combination of both of them, and every day with them felt like a gift. "You know," Emily said, her voice soft, "I never thought I'd have this. A family. A life I'm proud of." Peter smiled and pulled her closer. "I never thought I'd find someone who would make me believe in all of this. But you did, Emily. You made everything feel real." Their children ran up to them, laughing and full of energy, and Peter lifted them up in his arms, holding them close. In that moment, Emily knew that they had built something that no amount of money or power could replace. They had built a family, a life together. And that was worth more than anything. As they watched the sunset together, hand in hand, Emily felt a deep sense of contentment. The road had been long, and it hadn't always been easy, but it had led them here. To a place of love, of family, and of dreams come true. And as she looked at Peter, she knew that no matter where life would take them next, they would face it together, as they always had. The invitation that had been sent to the wrong address had changed their lives in ways they could never have imagined. It had brought them together, not because of what they had, but because of who they were. And in the end, that was the greatest gift of all. Together, they had built something real, something that would last a lifetime.